Welcome back everyone, it is Mike from ManaHoarders. In this video we are bringing you a deck tech for a new commander from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Tatsunari Toad Rider. You can cast this commander for 2 and a black. You get a 3/3 legendary human ninja. The ability reads, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kaimi, create Kaimi, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature token with, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And the second ability for 1 in a green or a blue, Tatsunari and target frog can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. Before we dive into the deck, let's go over a few key points. First up, the final price for this build came in at $84.52. This does include the price of our commander and all of our lands. Now, do bear in mind, these prices will vary greatly depending on the quality of the cards you purchase, the vendor you use, the pre-release price fluctuations, and a variety of other factors. Tatsunari is a unique commander that offers a variety of build options, but for this build specifically, we are leaning more with an enchantment strategy. This means we are obviously running plenty of enchantments and plenty of cards that will capitalize and gain its value when we are playing these enchantments. This also means that when Tatsunari and Kaimi are on the battlefield, we will be draining our opponents and gaining some life. And of course, that second ability is nothing to scoff at, as it can give our commander and a frog of our choice a form of evasion, making it difficult for some of our opponents to stop us from leaping over them and dealing lethal damage. Now let's go ahead and dive into the deck. First up are our artifacts. Arcane Signet can tap and give us 1 mana of any color of our commander's color identity. Bow of Nylea. This is also going to count as an enchantment, which will draw us value from our commander. Attacking creatures we control have Death Touch. We can also pay 1 and a green and tap it and choose one of the following abilities. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, deal 2 damage to target creature with flying, gain 3 life, or put up to 4 target cards from our graveyard on the bottom of our library in any order. And Soul Ring, which can tap for 2 colorless mana. For our instance, Arcane Denial, we can counter target spell. Its controller may drop to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and we will also draw a card at the next turn's upkeep. Dark Ritual will add 3 black mana. Dispel can counter target instant spell. Dive Down, target creature we control gets +0/+3 and gains hexproof. Mana Leak will counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Opt, we can scry 1 and draw 1. Roiling Regrowth, we will sacrifice our land, search our library for up to 2 basic lands, and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Spell Pierce will counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. And Tamiyo's Safekeeping. Target permanent we control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and we gain 2 life. Next up are our sorceries. Commune with Spirits. We can look at the top 4 cards of our library, reveal an enchantment or land card from among them and put it into our hand, and we'll put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. Creeping Renaissance, we choose a permanent type and then return all cards of the chosen type from our graveyard to our hand. Cultivate, we can search our library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into our hand. Diabolic Tutor, we can search our library for a card, put it into our hand and then shuffle. Preordain, we can scry 2 and then draw a card. Rampant Growth, we can search our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Moving on to our creatures, we do have some legends helping out our commander. Calliphy, Beloved of the Sea. The power is equal to our devotion to blue, and creatures and enchantments we control have spells your opponents cast that target this permanent cost 1 more to cast. Eutropia, the Twice Favored. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and that creature gains flying until end of turn. And Nylea Keen-Eyed. She herself is a legendary enchantment creature god. She is indestructible, makes our creature spells cost 1 less, and helps us look for creatures off the top of our library with her ability. And for our not-so-legendary creatures, Agent of Erebos. Whenever Agent of Erebos or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we can exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So the graveyard hate is real with this build. Archetype of Imagination, one of my personal favorite cards in enchantment build. Creatures we control have flying, and creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't have or gain flying. If you play your cards right, and play this card at a specific time and it resolves, you can leave your opponents completely defenseless and wide open for an all-out assault. Destiny Spinner, creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. Dockside Chef, another new one from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We can pay 1 in the black, sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw a card. I also like the fact that it is a 1 mana enchantment creature we can get out very easily and very quickly. Doomwake Giant. Whenever Doomwake Giant or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. If we can chain enough enchantments or enchantment creatures, we can wipe out some of the smaller creatures on our opponent's boards. Eidolon of Blossoms. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we can draw a card. Fang of Shigeki is a 1 mana 1/1 enchantment creature that has Death Touch. Generous Visitor. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Grim Guardian. Whenever Grim Guardian or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses 1 life. Hateful Eidolon. Whenever an enchanted creature dies, we can draw a card for each aura we controlled that was attached to it. Herald of the Pantheon makes our enchantments cost less, and whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can gain a life. Hypnotic Siren. Again, I like the fact that it is a creature we can get out for 1 mana that also gains its value because it is an enchantment creature, but the Bestow ability is nothing to scoff at. We can gain control of target creature, it gets +1/+1, and gains flying. Kami of Transience. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, it gets a 1/1 counter. And at the beginning of each end step, if an enchantment was put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we can return Kami of Transience from our graveyard to our hand. Nylea's Colossus. This card came in the first Commander Precon I ever purchased, and is still in my own personal enchantment deck to this day. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, double target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. While it does seem a bit slower due to the 7 mana converted mana cost, if you are able to play this card and capitalize with enough enchantments off of the ability, it is not unlikely that you can swing in for some commander damage with Tatsunari. Riptide Chimera. This card might seem a bit odd at first glance, but for 3 mana you get a 3/4 with flying. It's an enchantment creature, so we get to capitalize some value from casting it, and at the beginning of our upkeep we can return an enchantment we control to its owner's hand. Now obviously, with this build we want to keep casting enchantments as much as possible, so if we don't have a decent play in hand, we could potentially bounce one of our smaller enchantments from the board back to our hand, to then recast it and start generating more value. Sanctum Weaver. We can tap it and add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments we control. Setessan Champion has whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, it gets a 1/1 counter and we can draw a card. Verduran Enchantress. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can draw a card. Weaver of Harmony. Other enchantment creatures we control get +1/+1. We can also pay a green and tap it to copy target activated or triggered ability we control from an enchantment source. We can also choose new targets for the copy. And Whitewater Naiads. Whenever Whitewater Naiads or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Obviously this is very good. With the right enchantments in place, we can pump up a very powerful creature and make it so our opponents can't even block it. For our enchantments, we have Abundant Growth. We can enchant a land. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we draw a card, and the enchanted land can tap for 1 mana of any color. Alpha Authority. The enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Anna Sanctuary. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we control a blue or black permanent, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If we control a blue permanent and a black permanent, that creature gets +5/+5 instead. Ancestral Mask. This card does so much work. The enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. Aqueous Form. The enchanted creature can't be blocked, and whenever it attacks, we can scry 1. Arcane Flight. The enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. I also like the fact that it's only 1 blue mana. Auramancer's Guise. The enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it and has vigilance. Bower Passage. Creatures with flying can't block creatures we control. Canopy Cover. The enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. Cartouche of Knowledge. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can draw a card, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. Contempt. If the enchanted creature attacks, we return that creature and Contempt to their owner's hands at the end of combat. This is a sort of roundabout way to have some repeatable removal, but for 2 mana, it is a good way to kind of keep our opponents at bay. Corrupted Conscience, a personal favorite of mine. You enchant a creature, you control the enchanted creature, and that creature has Infect. Demonic Vigor. The enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and whenever it dies, we can return that card to its owner's hand. Enchantress's Presence. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we can draw a card. Fable of Wolf and Owl. I like the fact that we can pay for this one with green or blue mana. It also is pretty efficient at generating tokens. Whenever we play a green spell, we get a 2/2 green wolf, and whenever we play a blue spell, we get a 1/1 blue bird creature token with flying. Fertile Ground. We can enchant a land, and whenever the enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. Kaya's Ghost Form. We can enchant a creature or planeswalker we control. Whenever the enchanted permanent dies or is put into exile, we can return it to the battlefield under our control. Mirror Maid. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it will enter as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Necromancer's Mage Mark. Creatures we control that are enchanted get +1/+1. And if a creature we control that's enchanted would be put into a graveyard, we can return it to its owner's hand instead. Overgrowth. Whenever the enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 2 green. Rancor. The enchanted creature gets +2/+0, has trample, and whenever Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we can return it to its owner's hand. Telepathy. Our opponents play with their hands revealed. An awesome card for a single blue mana, in my opinion. and Wild Growth. Whenever the enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. And last but not least is our mana base. We are keeping things very basic with 14 basic forests, 11 basic islands, and 10 basic swamps. And just like that, we reached the end of this Commander deck tech for Tatsunari Toad Rider. We really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and leave a comment down below. Let us know what commanders you would like to see us build around in the future. We really appreciate all of your support.